Welcome to the 2014 VACo Video Magazine, the legislative edition. With us today we have Speaker Bill Howell. Speaker Howell has been Speaker of the House since 2003 and a member of the House of Delegates since 1988, representing the 28th District, which includes Stafford and parts of Fredericksburg. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Pete. Thank you.
It's a privilege to have you with us talking about some local government issues that we really care about. And I guess to begin with, we really want to ask you a couple questions that probably on the top issue that I think that's going to be debated in the 2014 General Assembly, and that's Medicaid reform or Medicaid expansion.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit from your perspective on how Virginia needs to go and the implications for reform or expansion?
It's a great question, Dean, because it's a great big issue this year. The Affordable Care Act provided that Medicaid, which is the health insurance for the indigent, for the truly poor, Medicaid would be expanded in all the states from 100% being qualified at up to 100% of poverty level to 138%. In Virginia, that would mean increasing our Medicaid rolls by about a third, by about 400,000 people. The Supreme Court held that the Affordable Care Act could not require every state to do it. So now it's optional. And about 25 states have indicated they want to go forward with this expansion. About 25 states, including Virginia, have said we want to think about it, or no. Virginia's in the thinking mode. And we created a commission in last year's General Assembly, which we call MERC, the Medicaid Innovation and Reform Commission. And MERC's charge is to find ways to make Medicaid more efficient, more effective, more affordable. The problem with Medicaid is it serves a good purpose. It's certainly a good idea to help those that can't help themselves. That's what states should be about. But Medicaid is a broken system. It's the second largest part of our general fund budget, by far the fastest growing part of our general fund budget. We spend over $9 billion a year is our share of Medicaid. In Virginia, the state pays 50% of the cost, the federal government pays 50% of the cost. And our 1/2 is an incredibly large portion of our budget. 22% of our general fund budget goes to Medicaid.
And growing, right?
And growing rapidly. And so we felt that if we're going to think about expanding the rolls, we need to make sure that we're not wasting that money. And the dollars that we're looking at are incredibly large. There are several concerns that we have about the act and how it relates to Virginia. Probably the largest is that the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, provides that for the first 3 years that the state elects to take this expansion, the federal government will pay for 100% of the medical cost. And then the federal government share ratchets it down to 90% by 2021. And theoretically stays at 90% forever. They pay 90%, the state would pay 10%. Unfortunately, the people that told you you can keep your insurance, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, are the same people that are saying we're going to pay 90% forever. The federal government today is over $17 trillion in debt. And that debt is growing at the rate of anywhere from $500 billion to $1 trillion a year. We just cannot sustain that increased spending. I don't think there's any question that at some point, 2, 3, 4 years from now, the federal government is going to say, we need to cut spending, and here's a good place to cut it. We'll let the states pick up 50% of the cost rather than 10% of the cost. And the cost to Virginia of having these extra 400,000 people on the rolls would probably be somewhere between $500 million and $750 million a year.
Is that for the administrative?
No, that's the medical cost.
Oh, the medical, okay.
If the federal government backs away from their commitment to pay 90%, which I believe they will do. That's going to crowd out other things. That's going to crowd out K-12 education. That's going to crowd out public safety, other social services. It's just a huge sum of money to anticipate the states having to pick up. And so we're trying to reform it. We're trying to make sure that there are better ways of delivering this care to the indigent people that truly need it. And the Commission's come up with some good ideas. We're continuing to come up with good ideas. The law provides that at such time as the Commission, which is made up of 5 members from the Senate and 5 members from the House, at such time as both bodies, the House and the Senate, by a majority, vote to move on and take this expanded Medicaid, that's when it will happen. So I don't think anything's going to happen for at least another year. Now, the interesting part that your listeners would be more interested in is the cost to local governments. It's something not many people have focused on. But the Medicaid expansion, the federal government's part, covers medical expenses. It doesn't cover the administrative expenses. If 400,000 people suddenly come on the rolls for Medicaid, how many people is the state going to have to hire? That DMAS, our Department of Medical Assistance, going to have to hire to handle that caseload. And I think more importantly for your viewers is, how many people are the local governments going to have to hire in their Division of Social, Department of Social Services to be caseworkers for these new Medicaid clients? I would imagine in a county like Fairfax or Loudoun or Prince William, if 400,000 people are going to come on the rolls statewide, they're going to pick up 25, 35, 40,000 people in new Medicaid patients. It's my understanding that DSS computes that it takes about one worker for every 1,000 patients on Medicaid. So you add 35,000 people, that's 35 new workers that Fairfax County is going to have to go out and hire and pay for.
Can I ask
Sure.
a quick question, I guess? Understanding that there will be a large output of dollars required for local governments to do eligibility for Medicaid and to beef up their social services. What about the discussions that have been out there that says that we're going to get all this new money coming in to Virginia, if we expand Medicaid, knowing that our state's a little different from other states that have gone the expansion route because we don't have hospitals run by counties.
Mm-hmm.
What about this money coming in? I mean, is it going to offset, or is it just going to?
Well, that's a good point, because it's an argument that the proponents of expanding Medicaid are using, I think, somewhat effectively, and that is that we're going to get this influx of money from the federal government, and that will grow the economy. Well, candidly, that's failed Keynesian economics that didn't work in the 30s. It certainly didn't work with the stimulus package that Congress passed a couple of years ago to stimulate the economy. Nearly $1 trillion in federal money was poured into the economy, and it didn't move an inch. And this is the same thing.
Are we still recovering?
We're still recovering very slowly. This has been the weakest recovery in the history of this country from a recession since the Great Depression. We never have had such a weak recovery. And they say it'll create new jobs, and yeah, that's something that we don't talk about with Medicaid expansion. Who's going to take care of these new patients? Doctors are leaving the Medicaid system now because it's very poor reimbursement. The patients aren't ideal patients in all cases, and as a result, there are less and less physicians that are willing to treat Medicaid. Well, if you drop 400,000 new patients on Virginia, who's going to take care of them? And the money that Virginians are paying in taxes because of the Affordable Care Act, which is not insignificant, goes to Washington, and it's not distributed to other states. It goes to pay the expenses. Really, who's paying for this Medicaid expansion are your children and my children, because this is all part of the $500 billion to $1 trillion a year in debt that the United States is borrowing that's going to pay for Medicaid expansion.
Mr. Speaker, I know that Chris Jones, Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, has said that the Governor McAuliffe will not be able to put forward any amendments to the budget. And we know that, I don't know how we're going to have any kind of debate, going forward, if he's not going to be able to put, because that's what is one of his top priority positions. I mean,
Sure.
how do we deal with that?
Well, two things. One, this is not unusual. The Appropriations Committee didn't allow Governor McDonald to put in amendments. It's not the governor's role to put in amendments to the budget that he's just created or that his predecessor created. He has an opportunity through the review process to add his own amendments or veto or line item out amendments. But also he has colleagues in the House and the Senate that can put in amendments for him. That's quite commonly done. But there's plenty of opportunity, and I'm not sure what kind of amendment he would suggest putting in, because the MERC, the Medicaid Innovation Commission, by law, has to come up with these decisions. And I think what he'd have to do, rather than put an amendment in, is have somebody put a bill in. And he can send down a bill anytime he wants to, a piece of legislation that would either amend or revoke the Merck Commission. I think that's his resource, his opportunity. And then, of course, he has opportunities during the budget review time when he can offer amendments. And so he's got plenty of, our governors in Virginia are very powerful, and they can do an awful lot.
Well, has the Merck Commission, they've actually come out with some recommendations.
They have indeed. Yes, they have. We think there's a lot more that they can come up with. They think there's more they can come up with. And an interesting thing about amending Medicaid is it takes the federal government's approval.
Okay.
There's an outfit called the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and they're the ones that have to approve any change in the Medicaid laws in an individual state. And that review process, that approval process, can take some time as well. And so we'll send up to CMS, we'd like to change the way we deliver Medicaid in Virginia by doing A, B, and C. And they'll say, well, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't, or whatever. So we're in that process now as well.
A couple other big issues that we're very concerned about. One is business taxes. You have been very supportive in helping us retain the ability, our authority in the local government world to levy and collect those local business taxes. This year, there is a lot of bills in that would challenge that authority. A lot of bills in that would try to cap certain fees or cap the VACo or machinery and tools taxes in the local level. And how do you see it going forward? Do you see, and I know that a lot of these bills are in House Finance, and we've struggled trying to educate the members as much as possible from our standpoint. And tell us a little bit, how do you see us going?
Nobody likes the B-poll tax because it's a very unfair tax. It's not taxed on profits, it's taxed on gross revenue. You know all the arguments. Nobody likes machinery and tools because they'll make the argument it discourages businesses from relocating to your community. But the bottom line is it's a source of revenue for the local governments that are already strapped, that are already stretched pretty thinly because their only other basic revenue source is real estate taxes. And I've always been of the feeling that if we're going to try and eliminate B-poll, my county doesn't have B-poll, but I guess it means we have machinery and tools, or machinery and tools tax. We've got to come up with some other way to give local government that revenue source. There's been a lot of talk about tax reform, general tax reform, and there are proposals out there by expanding the sales tax base to cover people that are presently excluded, like lawyers and accountants and dry cleaners and services. You can pick up enough additional money to get rid of the B-poll tax or the machinery and tools tax. I'm not convinced of that at this point. I don't think there's going to be any legislation that's introduced this year that's going to deal with reforming the tax code. I haven't seen anything at this date. And I don't think that the initiatives to eliminate the B-poll tax without some sort of corresponding increase in revenue for the local governments are going to have much traction.
Final question, I guess, since our time is running short, probably one of the most historic things that we've been a part of in the last several years is last year's transportation plan.
Yes.
That was passed. Going forward, looking ahead, looking into this year of what we can do as far as transportation, trying to find additional revenue for transportation projects. Have you got any ideas? I mean, I know we're struggling with the sales and use tax right now, trying to get the federal government to pass their portion so that we can create some revenue there. But
well, I think we're in good shape from a revenue side. We have added about $6 billion in the next 6 years in transportation funding. I think the challenge now, and we have a lot of legislation in this year to look at that, we want to make sure that we spend that money in the most effective, most efficient way. And there are a lot of 21st century ideas that we can use, developing metrics to make sure. What I want to see is that before we embark on a new transportation project, whether it be a turn lane or a new road, we measure how much congestion that proposed infrastructure improvement is going to generate, how much congestion relief, how much safety increases will you develop by a new project, and will it have any economic development benefit. I think that I know we can find metrics to determine that, and I think that's going to be a big help. There's a lot of other things that we can do by using technology to improve traffic flow. Just synchronizing stoplights is a huge improvement in traffic flow. Doing something about immediate accident responses. It drives me crazy when I'm in a road and there'll be a little fender bender and there'll be 2 fire engines there or whatever blocking traffic. And we're in the 21st century now. We've got to find a better way to do those kind of things. So there's probably about 6 or 8 bills in that will deal with things that we can do to make VDOT more effective, make the whole system a little more efficient. And I'm enthusiastic about Aubrey Lane, the new Secretary of Transportation, Charlie Kilpatrick, who's going to be our new Director of VDOT, Commissioner of VDOT. I think that these are people that can think outside the box and realize that we can't do things the way we've always done it. We've got to look at new ways, but we have the resources now to do a lot of good things in Virginia on transportation. There's no silver bullet, there's no panacea. I'm not going to be able to get from my house in Stafford to the Pentagon in 40 minutes during rush hour, but there will be improvements on the traffic flow.
Well, I want to thank you for your leadership last year in that, because that's a really historic move that we've made. We've not made any progress in years as far as...
Well, I give an awful lot of credit to Governor McDonald. He really pushed us on that, and it wouldn't have happened without his support.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Dean.
And
Always
visiting
good to see you.
with Virginia counties.
Thank you.
It's always good to talk about the issues, and hope you'll be receptive to our members as they come to Richmond in February for our local government day.
I always invite them in. Always got an open door.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean.